I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to explore some random tidbits. Thanks for being here, and welcome. And today I was just sitting outside, thinking about my last video, and we were examining these terminals. And this terminal was built in 10 years. I believe most of them were built in 10 years. Even the narrative told us that was a little long for a building in this time period. And I joked and said how most buildings could be built in 1 year, such as the Fort Jefferson in Florida. And this is really interesting. I didn't notice this before. All these lines. What are these lines? Just a fault in the photograph? Nevertheless, I really didn't talk about the narrative much. For myself, when I'm told something like this is built in 10 years in this time period, and let's just have a good look at this time period, depicted by these people, we need nothing more to indicate this. And again, when we're told something like this is built in 10 years, I don't care about the rest of the narrative. I don't care what architect or what leader commissioned what. Everything is just stupid beyond that point. And the video before that, I talked about renovations that were taking place in one of the great cathedrals of the nation. It may have been St.Patricks. I'll have to look. But they were telling us that most of what looked like stone, or in my opinion, cast, pre-manufactured concrete pieces, like in a kit, were made of plaster. That's what they were telling us. Even though we could see brick at the core of the cathedral, even in the photos, they were telling us it was mostly wood and plaster. Again, making us feel as if it's very easy and cheap. Oh, just plaster. And so here I thought this was very interesting. This cathedral has been standing for over 150 years, and they tell us it's faced with plaster. And that's fine. Plaster, in fact, can be used on an exterior. It can be fortified with cement and made very durable. And I think that is, in fact, what we see in many cases. And so I accept their notion that plaster can be used as something permanent. But then when we look at the World's Fair, we are told that these are plaster, but that it's all temporary. And so what is it? Is plaster permanent or is it temporary? And the truth is it's both. Again, if it's fortified with cement, it can be very durable. However, if it's a cheap, temporary plaster, it will crumble and deteriorate in the first rain. All of this would have washed away the way that chalk would disintegrate in a rainstorm. If, as they tell us, this was a temporary plaster. And I guarantee this is not a temporary plaster. No fool would waste their time using indoor plaster outdoors. No way. And so what is temporary, I ask you, about these buildings? If the plaster is durable, as it clearly appears to be, then there is nothing temporary about this building whatsoever. Just look at these people. Look at the size of these columns. Just the enormous scale of all of this. These people don't need the top 75% of this building. I can't get over these World's Fair pictures. How absolutely bored everybody looks. How can I tell? I don't know. How can we tell if somebody looks bored? It's just a sense that we are blessed with. This looks boring, and the people are bored. And I don't blame them for just hanging out here. I certainly wouldn't want to spend too much time in such a building, but that is my nature. I do prefer the outdoors. As beautiful and detailed as this architecture is, and how much I appreciate it, I don't want to hang out in here, and I would never build something like this. Not for a fair, not for my house. Perhaps it's best suited as a casino, or something frivolous in our time. And forgive me, I have beats boiling in the background. Maybe I'll turn it down. But I'm completely getting off topic. My point is, what is temporary about this building, or this one, or all this? Clearly this statue out in the water and all these retaining walls around the water feature are not made of a cheap, temporary plaster. I think just this water feature would have used up their supposed budget in this time period. Most of these buildings costing $1 million flat a piece. Last time I examined the official World's Fair profit and loss statement, and I don't know where else I could go with this. How much more could I stress? Just the lumber. Let's just say it was no plaster, just wood. Just imagine the amount of wood. If the whole core was made of wood, as they tell us, fine. Still absolutely remarkable. And a wood building is not a temporary building. This plaster is not temporary plaster, and it would make absolutely no sense to build all this permanence. Wood is clear to be permanent because the structures are standing. Temporary is something that can collapse, something that can freestand on its own for several hundred feet is not temporary. And this is the first lie. How can we accept this blatant lie with these World's Fairs? How can I stress this point anymore? What is temporary about any of this? And I'll just leave it there. And here I wanted to show you this melted rock. Been wanting to show it for a long time. But I have a new camera and it sucks. Isn't it the worst when your new something is worse than the old one? Maybe I'll use a pointer. So the lighting is really poor, but this is actually the corner of a brick. And it's completely charred and vitrified. And unfortunately my camera just sucks. It is absolutely a verified melted brick. And it's not just an ordinary brick, it's the same as the brick you see below it. And here we can get a better look at that brick. It too has suffered a lot of damage. They were both pulled out of a blast furnace and were a gift from a friend. And this one must have been closest to the heat source. As we can see, it has absolutely been mangled. And if we found it out somewhere yonder, they would most likely tell us it was lava. But the beautiful thing is we still have this perfect corner showing us the brick. And for months I've been sitting on this brick, maybe a year, and it's been very painful to hear people say that brick can't melt while I've had this sitting next to me the whole time. But here it is. And here is what I believe is also a melted brick, but this has been melted from a past reset. Many of you will remember the video when I found this brick while exploring ruins. And if you remember in that video, all I wanted to find was a brick. And this thing was buried but level with the ground to where I just pulled it out. And very sharp edges. And here we can actually set it next to this other brick. Oops, I don't know if that came through. And we see exactly how brick-like it is. And we see evidence of heat, but long, long ago. So there we go, my melted brick. Once again, I'll spin it around. We can see the sharp corner. Here another little angle. And I sure wish I had better lighting. And perhaps we'll revisit this brick. And today I was talking with a friend who years ago was on the fence about our realm and the truth about it. And today we were talking about the sun and the triangulation of its rays through clouds, and how if the sun was hundreds of millions of miles away, the light passing through the clouds would be direct and not come down in a pyramid shape, allowing us to triangulate back to the source, which appears to be 12 to 50 miles at most. And it was very refreshing to hear his take on things. He was telling me about CERN and how he had heard that it was built over a portal, or the portal to hell. And he was saying how scientists talk about rainbows at CERN now in recent times, the creation of rainbows, and how this tied into Norse mythology, or quite possibly fact, of rainbow bridges, and the nature of our realm, really. What are they really doing with this CERN machine? Now, of course, I know what they say, but I'm simply asking a bigger question. And what about our sun? What is our sun doing? So many anomalies with our sun. Several times a week, I see a half moon within 20 degrees of the sun. And one of my favorites is the anomaly that we can see here. And this video was put out by One Conscious, and a lot of different channels have touched on this, and let me just cut right to it. What we see in between what is supposedly Russia and the United States is this Bering Strait, as we were taught in school. And what we're not taught in school is that there are two islands, the Diomedes, and this is also the international dateline. And I'm sure you've all seen the international dateline. Why, whatever the shape of the realm, does this dateline just get all crazy and zigzaggy at this point? And you can faintly see it under here. That is the first anomaly. The next anomaly, people realized, is these two islands, which are only about 10 or 20 miles apart, have about a 4-hour difference when it comes to their sunrise. Now these islands are right next to each other. Again, we have the international crazy dateline zigzagging its way through here. For what reason, we would be told, I don't care. But then we have this difference. One island, 6:47 a.m. the sun rises, and the other, 9:42. Where did the sun go? And for years there have been talks about chartering explorations to the pole. I've talked about wanting to continue north up through Greenland and seeing if we hit the 4 continents, home of Mount Meru. But here's something not too far away, not far off the coast of Alaska, certainly out of the way, but for the sake of research, not far. And here it varies. One Conscious and the APM research team tracked the sunrise for both of these islands, and you can see it varies from 4 to 3 hours. And we know that the Google Earth is a fabrication, and so is this type of projection, and so is this international dateline. Some crazy line used to justify a lie. And where is the sun going for these 3 hours? Is there more land in between here? Are there two suns? Do one of the suns go off to the north and another one comes down 3 hours later? I'm not sure. The only fact is this, that there is a 3-hour difference, give or take, for two islands 10 to 20 miles apart. And this just happens to be where the international dateline cuts through. And here IRS Media has shared with us a nice little showcase of prisons in Australia. And it was a fascinating rundown of what would absolutely be a ridiculous narrative for every single one of these prisons. And as I've stated before, usually anything castle is designated a prison, as we can see in the Philadelphia Penitentiary. And just really clear, especially out here in Australia, just absolutely remarkable buildings designated as prisons. Oftentimes armories and munition depots. And here we are at the Pennsylvania State Capitol. Here we would be told that such a building in the early 1900s could be completed in 5 years. 5 easy years. So what a predicament to find ourselves in. Everything we know is falsified. Our history a lie. This is clear, not just with my research, but with others who also contribute in this field. There's no denying it. And I've said it before, but if our history is false, our present is false. History is used to justify the present. And if the history is a lie, then so is the present and the system that we all live in. This is a lying, stealing, tyrannical system. And for the last 70 years has only gotten worse. And how long will we support this system? I was once told about a breakaway civilization. Some time ago, there's a book on the subject, and this was shared with me by the Level-Headed podcast crew. Shout out to those guys. And they told me about this book, originally published, as we see here, in 1902, about the Iron Republic. And it speaks of a group of people who realized the lie and escaped, or just left, beyond the ice wall, or just to lands unknown to us, and created a new civilization. And without the oppressors oppressing this people, were able to advance very quickly and create a very advanced civilization, as it would be with our people if we were not kept down by this bullshit system in which we find ourselves. And clearly in the past, whoever built wonders like this were not kept down by an unjust system. Such things were clearly created by a people unhindered by budgets, taxes, and permits. These were people doing some of the greatest work we see anywhere in all time periods, as far as we can see, whose works were not limited by anything as long as they were able to flourish. But eventually something did take these people out, or they just left. And perhaps it was these very same people, these very same builders, that left and formed this Iron Republic beyond the ice wall. And here I thought we would just bonus out a little. I threatened to make an exclusive video based on my pictures, and only my pictures that I've taken with my cell phone. And I never do. So I thought for this little bonus we would just look at some of my pictures. This is a look at the types of foods I've been eating lately. Here we have yams, mushrooms, egg, broccoli, bits of buffalo mozzarella, onion. I just kind of saute things like this up. Sometimes I throw some beets in there. Sometimes I use cauliflower. And again, this is based on the Dr. Gundry protocol, eliminating wheat, corn, soy, potatoes, and just about everything. Here's a little look at what I've been doing around my house. I have mounted this solar panel. It looks so small in this picture. It is small. It's only 18 by 18, but it's actually pretty roomy when you're inside. Here I've put a heater, as you can see here. Very proud of my heater, and it vents through the wall, so no combustion takes place inside. This is my favorite heater. I've been using this heater for years. I have one in my other little house next door, and so I bought the same exact one for my addition here. And here I don't have a current picture. Since this picture, I have 400 amp hour batteries mounted on this shelf and a power inverter under here. And essentially the power inverter will hook up to this cord, and these wires will slam into the panel, into this 60 amp breaker, powering my whole house. And in fact, last night I cheated and hooked up these 3 wires to a few of the lights down here. I just selectively grabbed a couple runs, and it was very exciting. I actually lit up my whole place. It was a real treat. And I still have to sheetrock the ceiling and just this top area here, the loft. And for Thanksgiving I went to Salt Lake and met up with my sister and dad and my sister's boyfriend, and we had a great time. They got an Airbnb, and since I had the dog, I got a hotel right here on the right side. It was a really nice dog friendly hotel. up on the edge of the Salt Lake Mountains, and it was just gorgeous. I've always wanted to stay at this hotel, and thankfully all the hotels were cheap and available for Thanksgiving. As usual, I was just in awe with all the buildings all over Salt Lake. This is the Capitol Theater. Just amazing, the amount of detail, where you wouldn't even think it was important to put detail. Like underneath these soffits, we can see these flowery patterns and these little mini columns on the sides of the windows, and in full color. I'm always happy to see when they've preserved these old wonders. And here I was at the Whole Foods, and some lady was parked next to me, and things were just falling out of her car. And it's not like me to take a picture of the inside of somebody's car, but I just couldn't resist. And this was in the Trolley Square Mall parking lot, which was an old railway station, 100+ years ago. Just a bustling railway station that fell into disrepair, and it would take Salt Lake over 75 years to re-implement any kind of light rail or train. And I always loved this tower. I believe this is an old world tower, and they've preserved it and actually celebrate it as an icon. And this is a really cool picture. I was just flying with the birds, and it turned out pretty cool. I should use it as an intro or something. There was actually thousands upon thousands. I just kind of caught the tail end. And everywhere I go, I see blocks that have been heated and fused together, and just some parts emphasizing the block lines, as we see here. And this must have just been some massive wall. And recently I found a great picture while hiking in this area, and most of this just looking unrecognizable, but some parts of these rocks having blocks, like one side of the block. And let me try to show you that. And it's a shame because all of these are beautiful images and I never end up sharing them. And it really doesn't matter what I think. I think everybody has something to offer and can shed some light. But it's a shame not to share it all. This I've shared with you before. I love this rock. This is in my truck right now, and it's very metallic when you bang it, and looks like it was some kind of a valve actually. And these look like threads, and this would have been some kind of bolt on the top. I'm not sure, but I think coupled with all the anomalies that I find out here, this looks like just a machine part or something. Here you'll remember this that I shared, and again on a larger scale. Very difficult to say. This also looks like the remains of a beast. And here's what I wanted to show you. This is a perfect example. So one side of the rock seems to have been hit with more heat, and then when you walk around to the back side of the rock, you can see all these block lines that have now fused together into a blob. Any more heat and these block lines disappear completely. And yet these chunks were just falling off of the mountain. This is essentially all of this, like we see in the background. And just gorgeous. This is one of my new favorite places. So I guess I'll leave you with that. I thank you for joining me today, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.